Henry gets it wrong. The Sodor wishing tree is a very old tree. It's older than Edward, older than Sir Handel. It's even older than the Fat Controller. Some say it's the oldest thing on the island. All the engines and children love to make wishes whenever they see the tree. Especially Henry. He thinks the wishing tree is magical. He whistles whenever he passes. One day, the Fat Controller arrived with some very bad news. A summer storm struck Sodor last night. The wishing tree was hit by lightning. All the engines were upset. Henry was the most upset of all. Some special woodsmen are arriving at Brendam Docks. Henry, you must take them to the wishing tree right away. Henry knew this was an important job. They have to be back at Brendam Docks by tea time. That's when their boat leaves.
Yes, sir.
And Henry puffed away as fast as he could. He chuffed towards Brendam Docks. At a junction, Henry decided to take the track that passed the wishing tree. Henry arrived at the wishing tree. It wasn't standing tall anymore. Some leaves were gone and some branches were broken. Sometimes, Henry, special woodsmen have to cut trees down.
Oh, no.
Now Henry was even more upset. Henry took the track to Brendam. His boiler bubbled and his steam sighed. But then he had to stop. Toby was blocking the line. He had snapped the piston rod. Oh dear, I can't get to Brendam if the track is blocked. Then Henry had an idea. If all the tracks were blocked, no one would be able to get to the tree, he thought. Then no one would be able to cut the tree down. I'll take your trucks for you, Toby. He buffered up to Toby's truck. Toby's driver coupled Henry to the trucks. Henry pumped his pistons and chuffed back down the track to the wishing tree. Then Henry saw Thomas at a signal. He had a long line of empty trucks to take to the quarry. I'll take your trucks for you, Thomas. Thomas happily agreed. So Henry reversed onto Thomas's track, and he slowly wheeshed away. Then Henry saw Percy at a water tower. Percy had to take truckloads of empty milk churns to the farm. Percy, I'll take your trucks for you.
Thank you, Henry.
Percy shunted his trucks onto the main line. Henry buffered up to Percy's trucks and whooshed away. Then Henry saw Emily. She had empty trucks to take to the coaling plant. I'll take your trucks for you, Emily. Thank you, Henry. So Emily shunted her train onto the main line. And Henry coupled up. He chuffed happily away. Henry had the longest line of trucks a big engine could pull. At last, Henry puffed to the Wishing Tree Junction. He left Emily and Percy's trucks on one track. Then he shunted Thomas's trucks onto another. Finally, he shunted Toby's trucks onto the express line. All the lines to the Wishing Tree were blocked. Now nobody can get through. The Wishing Tree will be safe. At Brendam Docks, the special woodsmen were waiting. Henry hadn't arrived, so the docks manager asked Salty to take the woodsman.
Aye, yes, sir.
Salty tried to get to the wishing tree, but all the tracks were blocked with trucks. Henry was still feeling very happy. Then he heard Harold hovering over him.
Henry, old chap, the special woodsmen can't get through to the wishing tree. They're the only ones that can help. Without them, the tree will have to be cut down. Oh dear, the woodsmen are here to save the wishing tree, not cut it down. I have made a very big mistake.
Henry felt terrible. Now I must put everything right as fast as I can. And he chuffed quickly away. First, Henry took Toby's trucks to the depot. Then he took Thomas's trucks to the quarry. Next, he took Emily's trucks to the coaling plant. Finally, he took Percy's trucks of empty milk churns to the farm. At last, all the tracks were clear. Henry collected the special woodsman. Thank you, Salty. Then he wheeshed quickly away. Soon, Henry chuffed up to the wishing tree. The woodsmen were ready to start their very special work. They cleared and propped. They clipped and chopped. And Henry helped too. Soon the wishing tree was standing tall again. The wishing tree was saved. I wish the wishing tree would last forever and ever. The special woodsman cheered, and Henry smiled his biggest smile ever. Percy and the Bandstand. It was summertime on the Island of Sodor. The Fat Controller was in Great Waterton with Miss Jenny, Jack and Alfie. They were building a new bandstand. There was to be an open-air concert that evening. It was a special surprise for Lady Hatt. She loved brass band. All the engines were busy helping to make the day special. Edward was bringing special parcels. Thomas was bringing the banners and bunting. And Percy was bringing gravel for the pathways. Thank you, Percy. Right on time. Percy tried to shunt the trucks into place, but the trucks decided to be troublesome.
Hold back! Hold back!
Percy pushed and pushed, but the trucks wouldn't move. Percy knew what he had to do. He had to use his do-as-I-say whistle. So Percy blew his whistle long and loudly. The trucks knew that when Percy blew his do-as-I-say whistle, they had to do what he wanted. It meant Percy was in charge. Soon, all the trucks were in line. The Fat Controller bustled over to Percy.
I hope I didn't blow my whistle too loudly.
Not at all, Percy. You showed you were in charge. Percy was relieved. Now, I need you to collect Lady Hatt and bring her to the surprise concert. You must be here by tea time, understand?
Yes, sir.
You mustn't tell her where she's going, or it will spoil the surprise.
Don't worry, sir, I won't.
Percy had collected the carriage. He had to meet Lady Hatt at Maithwaite Station. It was a long way from Great Waterton. At last, Percy puffed into Maithwaite Station. All aboard! Sir Topham Hatt has sent me to take you on a special trip. Oh, that sounds lovely. First of all, I'd like to go to the duck pond. And Lady Hatt climbed on board. Percy was worried. He was supposed to take Lady Hatt to the bandstand. That was her special trip. Percy knew there wasn't time to go to the duck pond, but he didn't dare tell Lady Hatt. He thought she might be cross. So he puffed to the duck pond. Lady Hatt stood by the duck pond. She liked watching the ducks. They quacked and quacked. But Percy wanted them to be on their way. At last, Lady Hatt was back on board. Next, I'd like to go to the windmill. Percy was very worried. He knew there wasn't time to go to the windmill, but he didn't feel brave enough to tell Lady Hatt. So Percy puffed away. When they arrived at the windmill, Dusty Miller was there. Lady Hatt was pleased. Hello, Dusty. How are you?
We're going to be really late now,
Percy huffed to himself. At last, Lady Hatt finished talking to Dusty.
Now, Percy, I'd like to see the bluebells in the woods. It would be the perfect end to my special trip.
Percy was more worried than ever. Percy puffed to the woods, but with every puff he was getting later and later, and further from Lady Hatt's surprise. Percy and Lady Hatt arrived at the wood. Lady Hatt wandered off to admire the bluebells. Percy waited and waited. Suddenly, Thomas puffed up to Percy.
Where have you been, Percy? The Fat Controller is cross. He doesn't want Lady Hatt to be late.
Percy didn't want the Fat Controller to be cross. He didn't want the surprise to be spoiled.
Don't worry, I'll have her there on time.
So Thomas puffed away. Percy couldn't see Lady Hatt anywhere. Percy knew what he had to do. He had to use his do-as-I-say whistle. Percy blew his whistle long and loudly. Lady Hatt came out of the woods. Percy, what do you want?
I'm taking you to a surprise. That's your special trip. Oh, I love surprises. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you'd be cross with me if I told you what to do. And now we might be late. We must hurry.
So Lady Hatt climbed quickly on board and Percy raced away. Percy steamed back to Great Waterton as fast as he could. The band was warming up. Jack and Alfie were very excited. Percy had arrived with Lady Hatt on time. The band started to play. Lady Hatt was delighted.
Oh, what a lovely surprise. Thank you for bringing me here on time, Percy.
And thank you, Percy, for keeping it a surprise. Percy was pleased. His do-as-I-say whistle had saved the day. It had been really useful, and so... Excellent Emily. It was autumn on the island of Sodor. There had been a terrible storm. Lots of tracks were blocked, and lots of engines had broken down. But Emily made it to Brendam Docks with her load. Well done. You're the only engine to arrive on time. You are excellent, Emily. That made Emily very proud. Excellent Emily, she thought. I like that. The Fat Controller had a very important job for Emily. Jeremy cannot land at the airport, and my mother is on board. The storm has blown some metal tanks across the runway. You must collect Trevor from Farmer McCall's. Take him to the airport so that he can clear the runway. Then Jeremy can land.
Oh, yes, sir. Excellent, Emily can do it.
Then Murdoch puffed alongside Emily. I'm going to Farmer McCall's too. Lots of lines are flooded. Take the Wellsworth track. I'm not going on that track. It's much quicker to go through the forest. I'm excellent, Emily. I can make it through. So Emily puffed through the forest. But soon she was up to her axles in water. Nothing will stop me. Excellent Emily will find a way through. So she puffed on through the water. It was hard work. At last, Emily chuffed out of the flood. But now she was late. Thomas was waiting at the junction.
There's a fallen tree. It's blocking the tracks. Harvey's coming to clear it.
I'm excellent, Emily. I don't need Harvey to clear the tracks for me. And she puffed proudly away. Emily chuffed up to the fallen tree. I'll easily push this out of my way, she huffed to herself. Emily pushed as hard as she could. But the tree didn't roll out of the way. It stayed in front of Emily. Now Emily had to push the tree up a hill. It was very hard work, and Emily was getting later and later. At last, Emily came to the top of the hill. The tree rolled away, and Emily raced down the other side. Emily met Duck at a junction. Trevor's waiting for you.
Don't worry, I'll be there soon.
Some of the tracks ahead are very muddy. If you get stuck in the mud, it's going to take you even longer. I'm excellent, Emily, and I know which tracks to choose. Duck was worried. Emily raced through the villages. She rattled through the valleys. I'm nearly there, Emily thought. Emily steamed round the final bend and straight into a big puddle of mud. I'll puff through this, thought Emily. Then the track started to sink. Emily was stuck. She didn't feel like excellent Emily anymore.
Oh no, now I'll never get Trevor to the airport.
Further up the track, Emily saw Murdoch.
Murdoch's already there,
she thought to herself.
I should have listened to Murdoch. I should have taken the Wellsworth track.
Now she needed Murdoch's help. Emily blew her whistle as loud as she could. Murdoch puffed over.
I'm very sorry, Murdoch. You were right. Please, will you pull me out of the mud?
Of course, Emily. Soon Murdoch was chained up to Emily. With a huff and a chuff, he pulled her out of the mud.
Thank you so much, Murdoch.
Emily puffed up to Farmer McCall's. Trevor was waiting.
I must take you to the airport right away, Trevor.
Emily pumped her pistons. Then she stopped. I know what I have to do, Emily thought.
Murdoch, which tracks would you take to the airport?
The tracks on Gordon's Hill are still being cleared. You should take the valley route instead.
Thank you, Murdoch.
And she puffed away. Emily puffed happily along the valley track.
Murdoch was right,
she thought. Then Emily saw a telegraph pole across the track in front of her. She was going to push it out of the way. Then she remembered what Thomas had said. I'd better wait for Harvey, she huffed to herself. Soon Harvey cleared the track and Emily was on her way again. Emily pulled up at a junction. Ahead, she saw a shortcut to the airport. That track's muddy. Emily remembered what Duck had said about muddy tracks. I don't want to get stuck again, thought Emily. I'll take the longer track. Soon Emily arrived at the airport. Trevor cleared the runway just in time. Jeremy landed smoothly and safely. The Fat Controller was delighted to see his mother. Well done, excellent Emily. You made it in time. That's because everyone helped me, sir. All of your engines are excellent engines. Saved you. Thomas is a really useful tank engine. Whenever anyone is in trouble, Thomas is always there to help. And because Thomas helps, deliveries are made on time without confusion and delay. One day, Thomas was at Maithwaite Station. The Fat Controller arrived on board Percy. Thomas, I need you to collect a very important passenger. He's a fireman and a hero. He rescued Lady Hatt's cat from a tree. A hero? Now we're going to give him a medal. Thomas puffed away to collect the fireman. He was very excited. He was going to meet a real hero. On the way, Thomas saw lots of children at the bus stop. They were excited too. We're going to see the fireman. Bertie, the bus is taking us to the medal ceremony. Up ahead, Thomas saw a water tower through the trees. The water tower was starting to wobble. Thomas saw Duck was right next to it. Oh no, the water tower's going to fall on Duck. I must rescue him. Thomas blew his whistle loudly. Quick, Duck, move now! Duck puffed quickly forward as the water tower crashed to the ground. I rescued you. No, you didn't. Rocky was putting the water tower on my flatbed, and now it's smashed. Thomas hadn't seen Rocky. Rocky had been hidden behind the trees. I'm sorry, but I don't have time to help you. I have to collect the fireman. He's a hero. Later, Thomas saw a tree. It had fallen onto the tracks. That looks dangerous, thought Thomas. I must go and tell the signalman. Thomas backed up to the signal box. There's a tree on the line. The engines must take another track. The signalman changed the points. Just then, Harvey raced towards the junction. He changed tracks and puffed down the other line. Harvey was surprised. Thomas was very pleased with himself. I rescued Harvey, Thomas thought proudly. Now I'm a hero. Thomas chuffed on to collect the firemen. He saw Donald and Douglas stuck behind the fallen tree. I hope Harvey gets here soon. Aye, we can't go anywhere until he moves this tree. Thomas knew he'd made a mistake. Oh no, I made Harvey take the other track. I'm not a hero at all. We need Harvey. I'm sorry, but I don't have time to find Harvey. I have to collect the fireman. He's a hero. Then Thomas saw Toby. Smoke and steam billowed from Toby's axles. Toby's broken down on Gordon's express line. Oh no, here comes Gordon. I have to rescue Toby. So Thomas puffed quickly back to the points. He changed over onto the express line. Thomas buffered up behind Toby and shunted him as fast as he could. Ooh, help! Don't worry, Toby. Thomas shunted Toby off the express line and into a siding. Gordon chuffed past. He didn't see Toby. I rescued you. No, you didn't. Gordon was bringing an engineer to fix me. Thomas knew he'd made another mistake. I haven't rescued anyone. I'm not a hero. And now the fireman won't get to the medal ceremony on time. Thomas felt terrible. Just then, Percy puffed up. Percy, will you go and pick up the fireman for me? Percy was very pleased. You'll have to hurry. The medal ceremony starts soon. So Percy raced away. Thomas knew what he had to do now. Thomas collected the engineer from Gordon and took him to fix Toby. Then Thomas found Harvey. He took Harvey to move the fallen tree. Harvey soon cleared the track. Thomas puffed sadly back to Tidmouth. Then he saw Bertie the bus. The children were standing around him. What's the matter? I'm stuck in the mud. Now I can't take the children to the medal ceremony. Shall I take the children for you? Yes, please. So all the children climbed on board Annie and Clarabel, and Thomas puffed away. Thomas arrived at the medal ceremony just in time. The Fat Controller and Lady Hatt gave the fireman his medal. The children were very happy. You're a hero. And you're our hero, Thomas. Thomas the hero beamed from buffer to buffer. The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue sea. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and a coal mine and docks where visitors to the island arrive. The island also has lots and lots of railway lines. Who's that puffing down the track? It's Thomas. Hello, Thomas. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Island of Sodor. Push me, pull you. One bright spring morning at the coal yard, the yard manager was talking to Scar Lowy. A puppet show is coming. The children will be excited. No one in the hills has ever seen a puppet show. Scar Lowy wanted to pull the puppet show special, so he raced away. Scar Lowy puffed into the transfer yards. Thomas and the thin controller were already there. Please, sir, may I pull the puppet show special? That's a fine idea, Scar Lowy. Scar Lowy's boiler bubbled with excitement. Watch out, they're heavy. Scar Lowy buffered up. Slowly, Scar Lowy puffed away. The trucks were heavy. But Scar Lowy was happy. The puppet show special was his. Skarloey heaved and hauled up the steep hill. At last, he reached the top. Rheneas was there. He was very excited to see the puppet show special. Those trucks look heavy. I could help you. But Skarloey didn't want to share his special with Rheneas. No, thank you. I can pull these trucks on my own. I'm stronger than you. No, you're not. Oh, yes, I am. Then an idea flew into Skarloey's funnel. We'll put the trucks between us and pull our hardest. The strongest engine will pull the puppet show special. Rheneas was soon coupled up to the back of the train. They pulled with all their strength and steam. First, the trucks trundled one way, then they trundled the other. Skarloey was determined to win. Then Rheneas heard a creaking and a cranking. He knew the couplings were being pulled too hard, but Skarloey wouldn't give up. I must win, he thought. Then there was trouble. With a crack and a clank, Rheneas's couplings snapped. The puppet show trucks bashed and bumped into Skarloey and pushed him down the other side of the hill. Skarloey was scared. He tried to apply his brakes, but they wouldn't work. Skarloey flew faster and faster down the steep hill. Skarloey saw Duncan. He was pushing trucks of bunting onto the main track. Look out, Duncan! Stop! But it was too late. Skarloey crashed into Duncan's trucks. Bunting flew into the air. It fell all over Skarloey. Duncan was cross. Oh, sorry, Duncan, but I must get the puppet show to the children. Skarloey raced on. The puppet show special clattered and chattered. Then Skarloey saw Rusty at a junction ahead. Rusty was pulling trucks of special ice cream. Out of my way! I can't stop! Rusty stopped right across the tracks. Skarloey bashed into Rusty's trucks. Ice cream flew into the air and splattered all over the engines. Rusty was cross. Now there would be no ice cream at the puppet show. Sorry, Rusty, but I must get the puppet show to the children. So Skarloey clattered on. Skarloey was puffing towards Percival Pond. Then there was trouble. Skarloey went round the bend too fast. He steamed into a siding. Skarloey bashed through the buffers. With a splash, a sploosh and a splosh, Skarloey plunged into Percival Pond. Fizzling fireboxes. I wanted to pull the puppet show special on my own. Now look what I've done. The children won't have ice cream or flags, and they won't have their puppet show. Help! But there was no one there to hear. Then Skarloey heard a whistle he knew. That's Rheneas, he thought. Rheneas puffed to the edge of the pond. Skarloey had never been happier to see his friend. I puffed as quickly as I could. Ha! I thought you might need my help. I do. I wanted to show you that I was the strongest, but all I have shown you is that I am the silliest. But Rheneas was happy to help. Slowly Rheneas heaved and hauled his friend out of the pond. At last, Skarloey was back on the rails, but his firebox was out, and his coal was wet. Rheneas, you must take the puppet show to the children. I have other jobs to do. Thank you, Skarloey. And Rheneas puffed proudly away with the puppet show special. Skarloey had a lot to do. He delivered new trucks of ice cream to Rusty. Then Skarloey found Duncan. Duncan's trucks were now filled with the bunting. I'm going to be late for the puppet show. Don't worry, Duncan. I'll help you. We'll steam to the showground in no time. Duncan and Skarloey arrived just in time. The children were gathered round the puppet show. Welcome everyone to the first puppet show in the hills. The children cheered. Skarloey puffed up to Rheneas. You're my best friend, Rheneas, and there's nothing stronger than friendship. Heave Ho Thomas. Thomas is a busy and cheery engine as he puffs and huffs across the island. He always toots hello to other engines and to children along the way, even when Thomas is pulling heavy loads. One morning, Thomas puffed into Brendam Docks. The Fat Controller was waiting. You are all here to welcome the new engine. His name is Hank. I've heard he's very special. I've heard he's very strong. Hank puffed into the docks. Hank was very special. He had red wheels and a bright red cowcatcher, and he was very tall. The engines had never seen an engine like Hank before. Hank looks as strong as a giant. I'm sure he isn't stronger than a Sodor engine. Now, Thomas, I have 3 jobs for you. First, you must take new machines from the docks to the factory. Then you are to pick up stone from the quarry and deliver it to the shunting yard. And lastly, you must pick up an old tractor from Farmer McCall's and take it to the repair yard. Yes, sir. And you must take Hank with you. Hank must see the important sights of Sodor. Be back by tea time for Hank's welcome party at Knapford. Thomas buffered up to the machine trucks. Hank chuffed alongside. Hello. Howdy, Thomas. Now you look like one of the finest little engines I've ever seen. Thomas didn't like being called little. I'm a tank engine. Thomas thought Hank was being cheeky. Those trucks are way too heavy for you. Let me take them for you. Hank meant to be helpful, but it made Thomas cross. No, thank you. I'm strong enough to pull much heavier loads than this. I'd be happy to help. But Thomas was already puffing out of the docks. At the signal, Thomas didn't take the track to the factory. He chuffed straight to the quarry. Thomas pulled ahead. I may not be grand and I may not be long, but I will show Hank that I'm stronger than strong, he huffed to himself. Thomas and Hank puffed into the quarry. Now I'm going to pick up the stone trucks. Hank was surprised. Hold your huffing there, Thomas. Let big old Hank take those trucks for you. No, thank you. Tank engines can pull very heavy loads. So Thomas heaved and huffed out of the quarry. Thomas wheezed and wheeshed. Handsome Hank gleamed and glowed by his side. Children waved from bridges. Hello, Thomas. Howdy, good to see you. Hey, Thomas, aren't you gonna whistle hello? Thomas hadn't the puff to whistle hello. Hank had plenty of puff. This made Thomas feel even crosser. Thomas pulled up to the halt. He was nearly out of puff. Hello, Farmer McCall. This is Hank. He's the new engine on Sodor. Howdy, Farmer McCall. That's a mighty fine tractor you have. Say, Thomas, you look all out of puff and pull. I'll take it for you. No, thank you. And the tractor was coupled up to the end of Thomas's trucks. Thomas huffed and he puffed. His wheels spun and spun.
Come on, Thomas. The train is too heavy for you. Take the pressure off your pistons. Couple me up.
But Thomas was determined to pull the train on his own. We must not be late for your party. Wheel turn by wheel turn, Thomas puffed away. Thomas and Hank arrived at Marin Station. Visitors waved at Thomas. Thomas wanted to whistle back, but he hadn't any spare steam.
Howdy, everybody. Thomas is overloaded right now. I'll whistle for him.
Hank had lots of steam, and Hank blew the longest and loudest whistle. Then there was trouble. Thomas had cracked a cylinder. The train was much too heavy.
Oh no, now the deliveries won't be made. You won't be back in time for your welcome party, and I'm not a really useful engine, or even a really strong one. Shucks, Thomas, I'm so sorry. That's too bad. I wanted to show you I wasn't just a fine little steam engine. I wanted to show you I was really strong. So, I didn't want to ask for your help. But I do now. Please, Hank.
I'd be happy to help. You give the orders, I'll do the pushing. Hank and Thomas dropped off Farmer McColl's tractor. The workmen were very sorry to see Thomas had broken down. Next, Hank and Thomas chuffed into the shunting yards. The yard manager was waiting. The stone trucks were uncoupled. I hope you're back on track soon, Thomas. Finally, Thomas and Hank delivered the new machines to the factory. Thank you, Thomas. Hank pushed Thomas back to Knapford Station. They arrived just in time for the party. Thank you, Hank. Now all of Sodor knows what a strong engine you are. Hank smiled.
And I know something too. You're the engine. Everyone cheers for on Sodor. That's something to be proud of.
Thomas smiled. Hank was very special. He was a very special new friend. The party surprise. In the hills of Sodor, it was time for the Thin Controller's winter holiday party. The party was held at his house. All the children looked forward to it. Mr. Percival and his family lived near the engine depot, so all the narrow gauge engines could enjoy the party too. It was the day of the party and Freddie was working with Colin the crane. They were very good friends. Freddie was excited.
This party will be the biggest party ever.
Then Mr. Percival arrived.
All this cargo must be loaded before the party.
Yes, sir. You can rely on us.
I must visit Mountain Village Station. I will be back in time for Freddie to take me to the party. Yes, sir.
Freddie told Colin all about the party.
There'll be decorations, presents, and a big tree covered in lights.
Freddie was excited. Colin wasn't. I've never been to a party. Colin was fixed in one place. He couldn't move from the siding.
We never have parties at the wharf.
Then Freddie had an idea. Maybe this year they could have the party at the wharf. It would be a surprise party for Colin, he thought cheerily. Freddie had to find Mr. Percival. He wanted to ask him if they could have the party at the wharf.
I have to go and collect another flatbed.
And Freddie raced away. Freddie saw Mr. Percival cycling away. Then he saw Peter Sam. Peter Sam was pulling flatbeds full of presents and coloured lights.
They must be for the party,
Freddie huffed to himself.
I have to stop Peter Sam taking them to Mr. Percival's house.
So Freddie didn't chuff after Mr. Percival. He raced after Peter Sam instead.
Peter Sam, stop, stop! The party is now at the wharf.
Peter Sam was surprised.
It will be a surprise party for Colin. I'll take your flatbeds. Will you tell the other engines?
All right, Freddy. And Peter Sam raced away. Freddy shunted the flatbeds to Colin.
Leave these flatbeds until I come back.
Colin was puzzled, but he still had lots to do, so he carried on working.
Now I must find Mr. Percival,
Freddy thought, and he raced away. On his way, Freddy met Rusty. There was something long and pointy on his flatbed.
It's the tree for the party. The party is now at the wharf.
Rusty was surprised.
I'll take your tree. Will you tell the other engines? All right, Freddy.
And Rusty raced quickly away. Freddy puffed and huffed to Colin.
Leave this flatbed until I come back.
Colin was puzzled, but he still had lots of other work to do. And Freddy raced away. It was getting late, and Freddy still hadn't asked Mr. Percival if they could have the party at the wharf. At last, Freddy puffed up to Mountain Village Station, but Mr. Percival wasn't there.
Mr. Percival's already gone back to the wharf. Oh no, I must puff back as quickly as I can.
At the wharf, the flatbeds were still waiting to be unloaded. Mr. Percival was cross.
Please, unload these at once.
Freddy had told Colin to wait for him, but Colin didn't want to get Freddy into trouble.
Yes, sir.
Then Mr. Percival went to look for Freddy. Soon, Freddy puffed up to Colin.
I waited for you, but Mr. Percival told me to finish the job. It's all done now.
He was very pleased. Freddy looked down at the canal. He wasn't pleased at all. The lights, presents and the tree were floating away on a barge. The children would soon arrive at Mr. Percival's house, and there was nothing there for the party. And there was nothing at the wharf either.
Now no one will have a party, and I still haven't found Mr. Percival,
Freddy huffed to himself. He felt terrible.
I must stop the barge.
Then Freddy saw Mr. Percival. He knew what he had to do. Freddy chuffed over to see Mr. Percival. Where have you been? Freddy told him all about his idea to have the party at the wharf.
It was a surprise for Colin, sir. Colin has never been to a party.
Mr. Percival thought having the party at the wharf was a very good idea. But you should have asked me first.
Ah, yes, sir. If I work quickly, I can still put everything right.
All right, Freddy, but hurry now. Freddy raced to catch up with the barge. He called out to the bargeman.
Stop! Please turn round and go back to Colin.
All right, Freddy. Freddy steamed back to Colin. He told Colin all about the party.
I wanted to have a surprise party for you.
For me? Colin was delighted and surprised. Soon Colin was unloading everything for the party. Now Freddy felt very happy. He steamed away to Mr. Percival's house. Freddy whistled to the children.
The party is now at the wharf.
Soon the children were on board, and they whooshed away. All the other engines were waiting at the wharf, even Thomas. Presents were piled high, the tree was covered in lights, and so was Colin.
What a wonderful party. Thank you, Freddy.
Freddy was delighted. All the engines whistled and tooted. The children cheered and cheered. It was their best winter holiday party. Toby's special surprise. Toby is a very cheerful steam tram. He isn't as big or as strong as some of the steam engines, but he's always happy to help and willing to work. One spring morning, Toby chuffed cheerfully into Tidmouth's sheds. "Good morning, everyone." "Good morning." The Fat Controller had arrived.
Henry, you are to take the mare to the Scottish castle. Emily, you are to take a party of school children to Black Lock. And Thomas, you must take me to Great Waterton.
Toby waited. He hoped he would be given a special job too.
And you, Toby, are to go to your shed and wait.
Toby was disappointed. His boiler barely bubbled.
This afternoon, you must pick up workmen and take them to Great Waterton.
Yes, sir. Toby watched his friends steam off to their special jobs. Waiting at his shed wasn't a special job at all. He puffed sadly away. Toby wondered why the other engines had been given specials and he hadn't. I know why, he thought. All the other engines have found something special. Emily found the seals at Black Lock. Henry found the flagpole for the Scottish castle. And Thomas found Great Waterton. If I find something, the Fat Controller will give me a special as well. I've plenty of time before I pick up the workmen. Toby puffed off to find something special. Toby steamed into the hills. Toby looked and looked, but he could see nothing special at all. Suddenly, Toby stopped. He could see a big red bird in a very tall tree. I found something special, he huffed to himself. Toby puffed closer. Now he could see it wasn't a big red bird. It was an old Wellington boot. Oh dear, thought Toby, that's not special. And he puffed on. Toby steamed deeper into the hills and away from Great Waterton. Suddenly he stopped. Toby could see something glistening and glittering in the afternoon sun. It's a treasure chest, thought Toby excitedly. I've found something very special. Toby puffed closer. Now he could see it wasn't a treasure chest at all. It was a rusty truck of old tin cans. Oh dear, that's not special. Then he heard a whistle. It was Whiff. He had come to take the truck to the rubbish yards.
Hello, Toby. Why are you looking at old tin cans?
Toby felt very silly. He chuffed quickly away. Toby puffed sadly to a junction. Thomas was on his way back to Tidmouth. Hello, Toby. The Fat Controller's waiting for you at Great Waterton. Bus my buffers. He had spent too much time looking for something special. Now he was late, so Toby steamed quickly away. Toby huffed to the halt. The workmen boarded Henrietta, and they puffed quickly away. Toby knew he had to hurry to get to Great Waterton. Then Toby saw something bright shining beside the track. Maybe this is special. Now the Fat Controller won't be cross with me, Toby thought. But it wasn't something special. It was an old piece of metal stuck in the bushes. Then there was trouble. Toby had puffed so far looking for something special, he had run out of coal. Toby felt terrible. He hadn't found anything special, he hadn't delivered the workmen, and he hadn't been a really useful steam tram. Toby had to do something quickly. It was getting late. Toby asked the workmen to hit the piece of metal as hard as they could with their tools. And I will ring my bell as loudly as I can. Someone at Great Waterton is sure to hear us and come to our rescue. The Fat Controller was waiting at Great Waterton Station. He had heard the banging and Toby's bell ringing.
Come along, Whiff. It sounds as though Toby's in trouble.
The Fat Controller arrived on Whiff.
Toby, what are you doing here?
Toby felt very silly.
I'm sorry, sir. I ran out of coal because I wanted to find something special. I thought then you would think that I am as special as the other engines.
But Toby, you are special.
But only when I'm really useful. I know that now. You'll always be special. You are the oldest steam tram on Sodor.
Toby felt very happy.
Now, let's fetch Rocky and get that old metal to the smelters.
Rocky quickly lifted the metal out of the bushes. Toby gasped, and so did the Fat Controller. On the other side of the metal was a picture of a steam tram. It looked just like Toby.
Toby, you have found the sign for the Great Waterton tram shed.
Toby's pistons popped with pride.
Now that's special. And Toby couldn't have felt happier to be a steam tram.